Idioms. They're everywhere. And in fact, when I was just walking on stage, someone said, "Tom, break a leg." I hope they didn't mean actually they wanted me to break a leg. Thankfully, I'm not doing that. But idioms, they are everywhere. Stirring up a hornet's nest, biting off more than you could chew. Well, today is not specifically about all idioms. It's about one idiom. The idiom that we believe that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Well, when we think about that concept, a lot of times we think about hereditary traits of young men and young women. So a little girl has dark hair just like dad. A boy is shy just like mom. But we hear this phrase over and over and over when someone doesn't do what they should do. Boy, you can tell that apple doesn't fall far from that tree. Well, if we actually believe that this is true, we would say that anybody who has a mom or dad that's successful would always be successful, would always be wealthy, would always be learned, if you will, would always have great education. But we know that's not true. Well, I'm going to leave that alone for a second, and I'm going to talk about just the inverse. What happens if we actually believe that this is true about the apple, not falling far from the tree? What does that say about the 11 million kids that are currently in poverty? If we believe that's the case, then 11 million children would always be in poverty as they matriculated through life. But I believe, and we'll talk briefly about why I believe that we can make the apple bounce. There's 3 parts of the elasticity to make the apple bounce: community, family, and school. All intertwined, but most importantly, the center of everything is the child and the student. So, how do we make the apple bounce? Let's look at this acronym. Belief, opportunities, understanding, nuance, community, and expectation. As we talk about belief, and I've talked about this so many times. I was at a conference not too long ago, talking in front of so many people, and I talked about this belief. And I'm like, I'm so tired of people telling me what they believe in. It's not about you telling anybody what you believe in. It's about how you behave. That tells everybody what you believe in. Behavior will trump you talking about belief over and over and over again. We know that to help kids understand what true belief is, they need to see that. They need to experience. They got to know that this is possible. They got to have that can-do attitude. We have to have that can-do attitude. So as superintendent, it's absolutely critical. If I believe that people have greatness in them, I can't try to control them. I have to help unleash their potential. Behavior will tell everybody what you believe in. It's not about what you say, it's what you do. Let's take a look at this in a different vein. A baby elephant is strung to a post, and as hard as they may try to break free, they can't. And you would think as the elephant gets older and bigger that they would do something different, that they would put a bigger rope, a chain, something different to prevent that elephant from breaking free. But that elephant was conditioned at a young age to know that they can't break free from that rope, and they never try because they don't believe it. It is our job in education, it's our job as moms and dads and uncles and aunts and grandparents to help develop that belief. We can't allow them to think that they're never going to be able to break free. Opportunities. I'm going to talk about this 3 different ways. One, in schools. We have to create equitable opportunities across the gamut and empower students. That's what we're about. Really simple. Right? But it's not just that. It's not all in the school. It's also on the parents, the families, also the community, to help find some of those opportunities if the school is not doing that. We can't just say, well, school's not doing that, or family's not doing that, or the kid's not doing that, and leave it all alone. And then the third point is this. Students need to take advantage. Taking advantage of the opportunities is critical, and they have to do that. I talked a lot about this recently, about these fleas that they're incredible studies that are all over this country. But the specific one I'm going to talk about is when fleas who are genetically predisposed to jump 36 inches are put in a jar. Well, how high do they jump? Initially, they try to jump 36 inches. They don't get very far, right? So they hit their head over and over and over again. And eventually, they become conditioned, just like the elephant. But that's not where the story or the research study ends. So they take the fleas out, and you would think, now that they're free, they're going to jump 36 inches. But that's not the case. They jump just below the height of the lid. Now, that's bad enough, right? But those fleas have offspring, genetically predisposed to jump 36 inches. And they can't, or they won't, because they don't have that belief. Even though they've been given that opportunity to jump 36 inches, they can't do it. And that's what happens over and over and over again in our schools, in our homes, is that we prevent people from jumping even though they're genetically predisposed for greatness. Understanding. We have to really take a step back and trust enough, trust in each other, listen more, develop more understanding in these trusting environments so that we can help the belief system, the opportunities, and ultimately this deep understanding that is critically needed of who kids are, where they are, and why they are. Understanding all of that changes things. It changes a perception, one's own perception. Voltaire said common sense is not so common. What I'm saying is really, really common. But I'm going to agree with Voltaire on this one. We actually need to do the uncommon and think differently. The nuance. In life, we have all these twists and turns in life. What happens each and every day. We know that we don't always make the best decisions, and certainly those wonderful kids that we serve do the same thing. We have to help them understand the nuance of decision making, the nuance of what happens when you don't do your work, the nuance of what happens when you're hanging out with people who you shouldn't be hanging out with, or that don't have your best interests in mind. We all have this river of life that we're going down right now. And there's all these tributaries that feed into that river of life. Well, I believe we can control those tributaries. Some we just don't ever let get to us. Some we may have to dam up. But the reality is, if we develop this deep belief system, help kids do that, create these wonderful opportunities, and understand who, where, why the kids are and their strengths and their interests, and help them understand the nuances of decision making and so forth, it would be critical. And to understand the community. The community, so here's the question to all the students and the parents and the school. Who is your community? Who is the community that you're allowing students to be around? Well, we know, and there's many different stories of this, but there's an old adage that if you're hanging around with chickens, you're going to cluck. And if you're hanging around with the eagles, you're going to fly or you're going to soar. Who are you hanging out with? Parents. Who are you allowing your sons and daughters to hang out with? Grandparents, grandfathers, grandmothers. Please know who your grandchildren are hanging out with. Uncles, aunts, same thing. It's not okay for them to hang out with people that you know. And furthermore, it's not okay for you to allow them to hang out with somebody just because you're friends with their mother and father and you know their kids aren't good. And I hate to say that, but the reality is not making great decisions over and over and over will lead to that perception of not being good. And we also know that 95%, as much as 95% of the success of someone is attributed to who they hang out with. Expectations. I tend to get myself into trouble when I talk about expectations. So I'm going to be exceptionally clear on this one. When I spoke at that conference I mentioned earlier, I talked about unrelenting expectations, holding everybody accountable in a child's life. Unrelenting. And someone pushed back on me. And they said, well, what about empathy? What about understanding and compassion? Oh, don't get me wrong. Yes, we have to have that. But sometimes we love kids so much, we love them in these cycles of poverty because we don't hold them accountable for learning. And we feel badly when things happen, and we do. And especially now we have to understand about mental health more than ever. So I understand taking time out of learning to take care of someone's immediate needs, as Maslow talks about, most basic of all needs. But at some point, what you were going to do matters. So the high unrelenting expectations, it's critical for that bounce. Because ultimately, what happens if they go into the community that we don't want them in? They don't understand the nuance of decision making. And they don't have those opportunities because they're doing things in the community, which will lead to not having that belief. You know, sad statistic, 1 of 4 high school students that recently graduated said their high schools and schools held high expectations for them. The kids know. The kids will love the staff, love the administrators, love everybody, no question. They'll say they were great, but ultimately everybody looks back and they will say, I wish I got pushed a little bit harder if they're not happy with their lot in life. Schools, please, high, unrelenting expectations. In a compassionate way, though, in an understanding. Well, I believe this, that in these environments, by creating apples that will bounce, because again, 11 million children currently in poverty, if we believe the adage, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, would still be in poverty. We have to do something different. Creating these magical moments can happen by creating the elasticity, by working together with families, by working together with communities and their community, our community, and working together certainly with the schools. Will allow that apple to bounce. And I suggest this, not just sometimes, but if you do this together and we have that belief, the opportunities, the equitable opportunities that we need to create, taking advantage of those opportunities and that understanding of who, why, and where we are, and helping kids understand the same thing, and the nuance and the community and the expectation. I will suggest to you today, not sometimes, but each and every time, that apple will bounce. Thank you.